going to call first Pedro Lana from the YouthLACIGF. He's on site just here. Pedro, I'm going to put I'm going to put the two questions. You feel free to tackle them. First is the risks of digital autonomy, balancing national interests with preserving a global internet. What are the concrete cases from the NRIs community and from the YouthLACIGF in terms of infrastructure, connectivity, and fragmentation? Are there specific uses in terms of internet development and safeguards for citizens' rights, for example, cooperation among countries? Pedro, please.
I'm actually gonna answer that instead of a specific case on a more general note. That the interesting part about the youth, IGF related to digital sovereignty, is that youth and the LAC region usually have similar way to be treated about the sovereignty in general, that others try to do it for us. So in this place, when we are talking about digital sovereignty, we have to know that the same concepts that apply to United States, that apply to Europe, can be, and normally they are not the same things that will apply to us as youth in Latin America. For example, data sovereignty may be something here in Europe in the new directives, and may be something totally different when a deputy from Brazil is proposing it.
Thank you very much, Pedro. And I think self-determination is the key remark that we need to take into consideration. Next, I have online Eileen Cejas. Eileen, bienvenida. Eileen is going to talk about the youth, the perspectives of the YouthLACIGF Argentina. Yes,
awesome.
You're here.
Hi, everyone, and thank you very much for giving me the floor, Raquel. I can give you a little bit of the perspective from the youth in Argentina. Well, in Argentina, we have the precedent of the draft bill about digital sovereignty on data from 2017, when the reason behind this law was to protect the data of the Argentinian state by keeping all the data in national servers without the possibility of making security backups in foreigners' jurisdiction. I think this law could have been relevant if we have an appropriate cybersecurity strategy and national level, and let me tell you why. The recent disclosure of the Argentinian database of IDs, RENAPER in Spanish, compromised deeply the security of personal data of citizens. That is not something to take lightly into consideration, besides the seriousness of a security breach of a national database. Going into the general picture, we believe the idea of having national data in national servers is a good thing, but we shouldn't forget that Argentina still doesn't have the capacity on its own to have those servers, not only because of the necessity of more funding in building the internet infrastructure networks and providing digital tools to marginalized communities from both private and state contributions, but also because first we need to think about implementing a strong cybersecurity strategy with the participation of all stakeholders in its designs, besides asking, of course, for the support on other neighbor countries to gather best practices, because we believe we should maintain an open internet approach. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias. Thank you very much, Eileen. And I take your key points on how to balance the data localization and the open internet, and what are the threats in the middle. Pedro, you want to make a comment on that? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to add something to what Professor Milton has said, and complementing what others have already added to the discussion, is that another kind of confusion that we must be careful to not fall into is that between cultural differences and governmental desires, because too many times governmental desires or governmental objectives, aims are presented as cultural differences. And this is presented more of a self-determination way, a self-determination advancement, when it's in fact as a digital sovereignty movement, a digital sovereignty act in the concepts that were presented to us by Professor Milton. And this is something that can be really stressful when we're talking about, because you can offend this part about cultural differences. But if it's something that a government is imposing through their own will, through their own desire, and it's bad for the population, we can't just talk about cultural difference. The example that I'm thinking of is the ongoing attempt to regulate content moderation there in Brazil, that the justification is about giving freedom of expression and self-determination to Brazilians in relation to social media. But it's actually something that there was a survey around the population. It's something that the Brazilian population simply doesn't want. But when you see the government trying to pass this bill or through another means, the provisional measure, for example, it's always based on something that we as a country, as a people, cannot just let others from the outside say what we can say and what we can't say. So something very important to keep in mind.
Thank you very much, Pedro. And I think you make an important point also on where we're talking about sovereignty and what we are talking about the so-called sovereignty. And it might be a tweak of more of demagogy speaking, but thank you very much. And I have online in the queue, Ikichin, you would like to come back. So what would you propose going forward? I'm going to start with Pedro. Please go ahead.
Well, this, of course, isn't an easy answer, but I would just come back to what I said before. When we're talking about digital sovereignty and self-determination as a side part, I believe the most important thing right now is being able to make to differentiate what is state-oriented policy and what is actual self-determination, what is something that a way to see the internet that doesn't just reply the way that US values and in somewhat manner European values are hardwired into the way we see the internet right now, the internet governance ecosystem. So being able to make this difference and create regulation, making public policies upon that is probably the most important part of this discussion right now.
Thank you very much, Pedro. And next I have Eileen. Would you like to say what's next?
Thank you very much, Raquel, for giving me the floor. I will try to be very brief because my connection isn't great today. So about the way forward, I think about different investments from countries. I can tell a little bit about the example of the Argentina government, who received a loan from the World Bank. And this loan was key for the implementation of the modernization and innovation project of public services. And this loan allowed the implementation of government digital services across Argentina, the development of digital platforms, and the usage of data to foster the innovation of the provision of public services. Moreover, this loan of $80 million is focused mainly on the universalization of access to ICTs, the opening of 200 digital points, puntos digitales in Spanish, and the ampliation of the National Center of Data of ARSAT, ARSAT. And also, as I was saying previously, if this loan can also be dedicated to increase all the infrastructure. It could definitely help to improve the digital sovereignty of Argentina. And as youth, we believe these type of measures are essential to bring in more inclusive internet governance for our country. Thank you very much. Gracias and obrigado.
Gracias, Eileen, and thank you very much for your remarks. And also, I know it's very early in Argentina right now, so thank you very much for joining us in certain conditions. And then